So, any questions? If you'd like to say who you are if you're going to ask a question, please, and where you're from, that'd be good.
Hello, it's Jane Renton here from Educatoring. Everything's pointing really very heavily to LASA. There's a lot being put on LASA's shoulders. I just wondered if I could ask Pete what he feels about that, and how much money are they prepared to spend on bringing in some very high-profile researcher, which does sound that it's actually needed by everybody in this industry.
I think we've got very broad shoulders because we are stronger and better together. Talk about LASA membership, and the board needs to take on board what their views are in terms of how we work together with others going forward. But also, like I asked earlier on, how do we fund this research? Orla was very clear in terms of what we need to do, and to be fair, she hit the nail right on the head. If we're not in the right position at the end of this parliament, you can kiss goodbye to universal free school meals and kiss goodbye to thousands of jobs, and we'll be taking a massive step back. So investment now for the future will reap rewards.
Could I just make a point?
Yeah, sure.
Just on that particular issue, we've been working on a separate issue recently, Sunday trading, and we've actually won that particular issue, which is fantastic news. But that was based around a coalition of ourselves, the shops, faith groups, the trade unions, and where we won was not just coming together, which is a good sort of example of what we can do here, but it was on the evidence base, the research that we commissioned, spent £150,000 as a coalition on that research, and that's what made the critical difference in terms of winning that campaign. So you're absolutely right to say the research is key, but it isn't just on LASA, it's on all of us to come together to do that, and we'd be absolutely happy to do that because we've got a model of where we've had success in that area already.
Thank you very much.
One thing I did learn, because I worked for the Children's Scottish School Food Trust years ago, and I've had a view of both the private, public and non-government organisations, that what we would call at the time. What I learned with working with the School Food Trust is the power of evidence, and the department does listen to that, and it's very difficult for them to kick back when it's there in black and white, when people are all saying the same thing.
All of what about to say something?
Dig deep, all of you. It's a £600 million of taxpayer subsidy into your industry. £150,000 is a lot of money to spend on research. I think you could probably shop around, and maybe that sounds like you got the absolute top. I'm sure you could.
That was like 6 different pieces of research.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean it sounds amazing, and
polling
it's
and all
yeah,
sorts,
and it did the job for you. I think you could probably start with that and work your way back. You will kick yourselves if you lose that £600 million subsidy in a couple of years' time because you didn't spend a tiny amount of money on some research. Dig deep, all of you.
It's Tim Blowers from Derbyshire County Council. My question to the panel is about holiday hunger. Holiday hunger in our authority, we've done a lot of work on that, working with the voluntary sector, trying to put actions in place, trying to get schools to open. But really the point is that there's no money for it. There's no money in the authority. The government won't fund it. The voluntary sector can't do the job unless they've got some basic facilities like storage facilities and fuel to put in the vehicles to move the food around. So where do you see it going? Is it gonna sink? Is it gonna stagnate? Or is it gonna grow?
Should I pick that one?
Peter, I think.
Many of you may know that I'm quite passionate about this for a number of reasons. I think there's not one fix for this. It has to be, I'm not sort of like calling on government to fund this. I think it has to be a cross-sector initiative, both third sector, community, church, education, local government, schools, anybody and everybody who's got an interest in children's well-being, health and well-being, needs to get involved. And we don't have to be big. We have to do it a step at a time and really, again, measure that impact. I think also public sector and private sector need to get involved. I know they are doing. I think it has grown exponentially over the last sort of like 12, 18 months, and will grow. It will stay. And it will stay because there's a need.
I think that's absolutely right. It's not just on public sector, it's not just on the schools, local authorities, communities, businesses have got a role to play, and they are doing, because it's something they want to do and they're able to do. They've got deep pockets, they've got the economies of scale, they've got the ability to help, but we need support from government to allow the schools to be open, to allow kitchens to be available in the holidays. So we're lobbying for legislative change, regulatory change, but the infrastructure is there and the partnerships are in place. We just need help to all come together. But the private sector has a role to play, and it's a role that's very, very keen to do so.
I think I agree with that. I disagree slightly that I do think it's government's responsibility to make sure that those children eligible for free school meals during term time are also eligible for them outside of term time. And there is lots of work going on at the moment. So the School Food Aid PPG has actually commissioned a task force, a holiday hunger task force, to look at what the problem is. There is some fantastic solutions out there already. So there are lots of organisations, church groups, housing associations, businesses, local communities, all coming together to speak to their local authorities, to open up kitchens, to open up facilities. Holiday Kitchen, Make Lunch are two great organisations that are doing great work out there. But I don't think that we can just say this is something that we can all come together as businesses to sort out. I do think that we need legislation. I do think that we need an acknowledgement from government that it's not acceptable that we've got hungry children, whether that's at school or outside of school. And until something changes legislatively to change that bonkers means-tested benefit system that I spoke about earlier, I don't think that we're going to be able to address this as a problem, irrelevant of how we come together as an industry.
So can I just come back on that? I've seen children sit there and have 2 or 3 portions when we did a pilot in Sheffield, and that was supported by my company. Now, just sitting down and listening to those children and what they do during the summer holidays, I asked them, you know, what do you do? Well, I sit at home in my room and play my PlayStation. No, but what else do you do? They don't see anybody. They don't get their parents there because parents are out of work. They don't have anything to eat. And it's not just about the hunger element. It's about the enrichment. It's about these children coming together, playing together, making new friends. It is about a whole package. So it's not about hunger per se. It's about the child and the child's whole well-being.
Thank you. Go on, then one more question, one more point on this.
One more point. One of the reasons why I think the Holiday Hunger campaign is having difficulty is there's no lead government department, and that might be part of their way of swerving it. It's really hard work to get government engaged when there's no lead department. So the first step, I think, might be as part of the campaign is to get somebody somewhere in government, force them to appoint a lead minister.
Thank you, Laura. Another question?
Linda Mitchell, North Somerset Council. Just going back to the previous question, the cynic in me would suggest that the reason that the government hasn't put into place any mechanism for establishing uptake figures, data, and the evidence to continue is because exactly that. They will be able to point to the fact that it isn't proven and be able to withdraw the funding. And so probably my question to Orla is, could that be a way of that the government do think? And if so, a question to the board to ensure that any funds that LASA can commit or do commit or join with other organisations to commit to providing this much needed research, which I would absolutely support, should be done in addition to the work that we're doing at the moment, because I think if we take the foot off the lobbying angle, then we diminish the work that we do in other areas. So it's difficult in these straitened times, but I don't think it can be an either or. It has to be an as well as.
Sorry, I'll sit forward. I think I'm still bound by the Official Secrets Act, so I think I'll have to be a bit careful. I'm not going to answer your cynical point, but I would say if a government is committed to a policy and they want to keep it, they'll evaluate it so that they have the evidence. And it doesn't look like they're evaluating.
Very good answer.
So do it yourselves. And also Scotland's doing it, and they're a year ahead of you. So keep an eye on Scotland. There is a website. Sorry, I made that sound really dark. There's a there's a website from Health Scotland. It's all above board. It's an NHS study, and it's all freely available. They've started off on take-up and parental attitude, but they're going to get to outcomes hopefully soon. So if all else fails and government refuses to evaluate, you can look to Scotland. The second point on that is you could maybe prompt them to evaluate by maybe sending a letter to the National Audit Office and asking them how they plan to hold DFE to account for a 600 million annual spend of revenue funding.
A nice one.
Just a thought.
Any more questions? Oh, Susan.
I've got a microphone. Sui, because I was part of the team, the Universal Infant Free School Meal Expert Advisors that went into schools. And at the end of each of one of those visits, and I was mostly visiting small schools, we produced a report, and then in some occasions we also sent in weekly data that was gathered from the schools. So who owns those reports? Because there were many, many expert advisors, not just myself in the Southwest. And could we interrogate those reports and that database to, as you said, backtrack to gain evidence to support the sustainability of universal infant free school meals?
I think that would be Linda and...
I think with regards who owns the data, it was a DFE contract, so any DFE contract means that they own the data and it's always written into the contracts. Can we interrogate data? We always can, and we're looking at what data is available at the moment. Obviously, there's rules around what we can and can't do with that data. Some of it falls under Data Protection Act, some of it falls under Crown ownership. But there is something we can do with that data, and we're just sitting down to work out what it is and how much we've got. With regards to individual reports themselves, obviously every advisor that went into a school left a copy of the report with the school, so they've got their own individual reports. Our system has copies of all of the reports, but again, we need to sit down and actually look at the confines of the contract about what we can and can't do. Anonymising most of the information generally kind of means we can use much of it, and obviously not using it for marketing and those sorts of things. So yes, there will be data that we can use, and we're looking at it at the moment.
Thank you, Linda. Just on that point, it's interesting that the school food plan is also Crown property, is it not?
Yeah.
So it belongs to government, not to the industry. So we have to be careful what we do with that as well. Bit beyond me, but I think it means that we can't just do what we like with it.
You need permission from them.
Yeah.
So there are ways around it, and there are conversations you can have, and obviously some things are easier to get permission for, as I'm sure Laura will tell you, than others, but yes.
So how many more questions can we have, Neil? 2 minutes, right. Starting now. Oh, Beverly.
Hi, Beverly Baker. I'm from Surrey and a LASA board member. I think everybody, if they didn't come into the room today feeling that we needed to take account of our own future and the evaluation, everybody would feel it now. And I'm sure if I asked everybody to put their hands up, do you think we as a partnership of people in the food sector, school food sector, would support taking control of our own evaluation? Can we have a show of hands if we think this is a good idea? So there's quite a lot of people that think that. Clearly it's a huge cost and a mission to actually achieve it. Does the panel think that this could be led by the replacement to the school food plan, the leadership team, or should it be led by elsewhere?
I'd say yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I think we need to have a discussion about that, and I think we need to decide what is best for the organisation group, for each organisation that sits within the group, because that's still to be finalised. What we don't have is time, really, so that some decisions need to be done fairly quickly. I think whoever we appoint and how that's managed, yes, there needs to be a point of reference, because that body needs to be accountable and needs to report. It's a lot of money, and again, when money's going out, we need to know where that money's going, and are we getting our bang for the buck? and what do we do with that information once we've gathered it. It's great gathering information and data, but when it sits on a shelf and nobody uses it, pointless.
I think actually that we probably should look at that leadership group once it's formed and once it's all finalised, because one of the great advantages that we're hoping to achieve out of that once it's all drawn up properly and everybody's around the table is that everybody's around the table, and it isn't just about one organisation, it is about maintaining that collaborative, and of course there's going to need to be a lead organisation and somebody taking responsibility for it. But I think you're absolutely right, Beverly, you know, let's harness what we've achieved so far with bringing all of those organisations around the table, and yes, it may well prove to be the best place to
The only
lead.
weakness I see in that, having been to the expert panel recently, is that the food industry, the supply industry and the manufacturing industry is not represented on that group. And I'm sure we're going to be asking them for some money. I think we need to address that.
I did advocate that at that meeting. Strongly, that everybody should be involved, especially the supply chain.
Yeah.
Without supply chain, we haven't got a business.
No, exactly. Yeah. So is that it? Right.
Could I throw that
Stand
back
up.
open? Could I throw that back open to the room? Has anybody else any other ideas where that leadership could sit, if not in the new School Food Plan Leadership Board? I'm not sure I know of an alternative mechanism, but if anyone in the room has an idea, then pipe up now. It's your chance.
I think LASA could play a huge role.
Yes, so do I.
But LASA hasn't got the money, but we have, you know, I think we're the ideal a body that could be very used, contribute, but we don't have that sort of money to do that. But we could harness sponsorship, support, leadership, commissioning even, and bring it all together. But it would need, you know, it's a time commitment, and it needs a plan, and it would need support from wider industry-related bodies. So I think it could be either or together.
You need a fundraising board to go and
Yes.
talk to your partners. And there are other interested parties in children's well-being as well. There are charitable foundations who may be able to help you. Don't grind to a halt because you can't think of where to get the money.
Well, I think it's been an interesting start to the day, which has gone on a bit longer than expected. And I do hope that the coffee isn't too stewed. But I'm sure you'd like to join me in thanking our panel for giving up their time and for their brilliant presentations. Thank you.